Most brand briefs start with a logo. How thinks that's exactly the wrong place to begin. The brands that last, she argues, start with words and not visuals, and very few agencies are built to do that. In a world where AI can generate a visual identity in minutes, verbal clarity has become the real differentiator. For CMOs navigating rebrands or trying to maintain consistency across fast-growing teams, this strategic foundation is the thing that either holds or breaks. How is the founder and executive creative director of How&How, a B Corp branding agency with studios in London and LA. A former design journalist for The Guardian and BBC, Kat brings a storyteller's instinct to brand strategy. In this episode, we get into why brands should develop their voice before their visual identity. Kat walks us through How&How uses verbal identity frameworks to prevent what she calls brand Frankensteining, how AI is changing what agencies are expected to deliver, and what it actually looks like to build a brand that scale-ups can grow into rather than out of. I'm Brianna Lawler. This is the CMO Club podcast. Kat, welcome. I'd love to hear a little bit about who you are, the agency you run, and also kind of the space that you work within.
Yeah, absolutely. I am Kat How, a co-founder, executive creative director. I run a branding agency with my husband, Roger. We have studios in London and in LA. We run a great team and we work with lots of companies, quite a lot of tech companies, but also companies doing good for people and planet. That's a bit of a soft spot for us. We're a B Corp, so we do brands that are purpose-led, climate tech, clean tech, but anyone with a good idea that wants to liberate it into the world through the help of better communication, be that verbal or visual, essentially. Tech is obviously very varied. So we work with femtech, health tech, climate tech, prop tech, any tech.
A lot of startups, I imagine?
Well, actually not necessarily. No. Startups I love. But quite often the product's always changing and they don't really have much money and they don't know where to spend it and it's all a bit confused and things they want to iterate more. And I think we love working with scale-ups that know themselves, they've got a viable product, business, and they really know who they are. Well, they sort of know, and they just need to reframe who they are because they've lost a bit of that journey along the way, or that narrative along the way.
And that can happen. It's almost like you get to act as a sounding board and a guide, because when a company really knows itself well, then it's poised to equip themselves with a really strong brand. And that seems to be your area of expertise.
Yes, exactly. So strong narrative-led brands, essentially. And I think we do occasionally, when we do work with startups, they're founded by founders who have exited other businesses and already know the value of brand, and so come to us and they've got a bit more cash, and they're like, right, we know that brand, there's this intangible value of brand that we're always trying to show in our work and show in the metrics that come out of the work after the ROIs. So it's essentially people that know what they need. That's ideal. But also sometimes people just need a bit of help and guidance into excavating what it is that's always been there about their brand and about their company. And we just help
bring it
show it once more.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I feel like a lot of folks maybe make the mistake of combining brand and marketing as one and the same, and they're not. How would you identify brand and how you show up in the world compared to marketing, which is the more tactical component? Like, do you want to venture down that road?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's a meaty one. Brand is not a logo. It's not a design system, and it's not a color palette. It's a whole, which is way more than the sum of its parts, obviously. It's essentially the most valuable real estate in someone's mind, which is what we want to occupy. And it's the thought, and essentially brands only really exist in the minds of their customers. Really, you can buy a product, but really, if you are remembered, that's an amazing component of brand. Of course, marketing helps that happen. Marketing activates key truths about a brand. So what we do in our work is, through the strategy that we do at the beginning, we excavate that truth, we uncover it, we tell the story of the brand, because stories are memorized or remembered 22 times more than facts. So we're all about stories. So what we really want to do is make brands that are memorable, and marketing helps that, of course. So marketing is an extension of how the brand just shows up in different ways, I'd say, and how it can speak and how it can flex.
Yes.
It's, they're obviously in the same family, but but a brand is really just a truth that has to be told well and consistently over time, and people have to believe that truth. And I think marketing is then the vehicle to do that. I work on the marketing of our company, obviously,
Right.
but I feel like I'm working on our brand as opposed to within and on other brands, essentially.
Thanks for highlighting that differentiation. I think it's really important because, as you said, it's important real estate that you're taking up. You want to make sure it's the right kind of feel, experience is how your brand shows up. For a lot of people right now, there's a dilution of brand happening on account of like the content that comes out if they're leveraging AI to produce that. So what would you say is run the other direction? Like, how do you kind of balance the need for putting things out quickly and ideally of high caliber, but also like keeping up with your competitors and then retaining that strong brand voice in what you're putting out into the world? Have you directly been using AI to support these initiatives in your own company?
So within our own company, we have an AI Slack channel, which I think was just really just for people to dump ideas and things and worries and concerns. And we call it the good, the bad, and the ugly, where we're like, okay, whatever we see, oh my God, they're doing this weird robot for this. And but also just to start to educate us. We started this probably about a year ago. We had been approached to do a rebrand for a Gen AI company. And so there was a little bit of unease in the, we knew that would be something that people might feel uneasy about. So we have something called the moral compass in the agency. So we put it to everyone. We had a meeting. We were like, cool, okay, Gen AI, who uses it? And everyone's like, me do. And I was like, okay, well, we've just been approached by Gen AI companies to do it, right? So then we had a discussion. We ended up doing the brand. So I was like, working in 6 months' time when the brand gets released, and we're just about to do it in the next few months. Things will have done so fast, and indeed they have. So we are very optimistic about how it can help us, and we do use it. So we use Gen AI in certain case studies or in certain places where it's appropriate. However, we also use real life illustrators to illustrate work. We also use real life copywriters to write all the copy. But we are asked more and more by companies, have you got a tone of voice bot? Have you got a brand bot? Can something? And so that actually weirdly could help. In terms of one thing we always see with brands is a bit of a Frankensteining over time. And so if you have your metric, if you have everything in a bot, which is programmed by us, and we're like, right, we've done the verbal identity, for example. So we'll put in all the prompts for you, and we'll give this to you as part of your deliverables. And actually, essentially, it's our responsibility as an agency to make sure that what we're delivering to a brand, to another company, is that it's something they can use and something that is lasting and meaningful, and that lots of different people in the company can use. So actually that is a great way of maintaining consistency if you have built these things that you can deliver. We're even trying to do that in our own agency. I've historically always written all the content for our social media channels. It's me boshing out copy because I'm used to it being an ex-journalist. But then, we had our account manager, one of our account managers doing it, a studio manager uploading stuff. Then we had a copywriter that I was doing it. And then suddenly everyone was like, whoa, 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 this is all getting quite, our tone of voice is being lost. And it feels like tonally we're not we're not coming across as very consistent. And obviously the minute you break that consistency and that promise to your followers, you're breaking a key brand rule.
Right.
So then we were like, okay, well, let's make a tone of voice bot for How&How. Let's do it. Let's chuck it into Claude. We're doing it now, in fact. And it means then that anyone in the agency could essentially just whip up a piece of copy. We're trying it out on a very small scale, but it's how we're using it. And so, we are adopting practices or queries that we're seeing in chemistry calls from clients, what they want. They're like, we want this to be like this. And, we're seeing what we could also do with that, because we also have to then start being the ones who can consult back and say, hey, have you thought about this? You should buy this, but don't use it for that. Use it for this. So it's a bit of back and forth.
There's this theme that comes up with a lot of marketing leaders that I've spoken to in the last 6 months. It's easy to get overwhelmed by this, and often people look to others as a guide to help inform when to use, when not to use, what guardrails to put up, how to make sure you're preserving that brand voice so that you have that longevity and you maintain that trust at the center of your relationship with your customer. So as you're navigating, working with all of these different types of industries, are you finding that there's kind of a framework that you're following that helps you serve what their need is? Are they often coming in with the same challenge, or do they come at the need for branding and maturing that brand presence at different angles?
Well, it depends. I mean, every company is different and every company comes to us at a different stage.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have founder CEOs and sometimes you have CMOs and who know a lot more about what they're doing. So although people come to us at different stages of that process, and quite often we have people come up and say, I want a website. Then you look at what they really need and it's just a rebrand masquerading as a new website. So and you're like, okay, let's just like roll back and work through what you do need. Oh, look, you probably do need a rebrand with a website at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So then there's a little bit of that, not education, but like that problem solving that you go through with the client as well. But essentially the framework is, we do have a process, which we do apply to pretty much everyone. We are really flexible in that process. But again, we've refined and tweaked the process over many years now,
Right.
to make sure that, chinks that happen, things, we always do a bit of a post-mortem after
Smart.
after we launch a project, just to be like, oh, great, what worked, what didn't work?
Yeah.
Like, what are the learnings from this? And so our process is always the same. We always really want to do the strategy at the beginning of a job, because quite often people say, oh, well, we've done all our positioning and all of our stuff internally. Yeah. And we're like, great, can we see the stuff? And it's very considered and there's loads of information. But what often is missing is the perspective to see the story and actually to tell the story in a really emotive way. Because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to change how people see a brand, change how people feel about a brand always. Totally. So it's like, great, this is really good that you've got all this information about the features, and this is like, you want to be like the best in the future and the fastest this, and great, that's great. But what's going to make you memorable? So that's so key at the beginning, is like, we need to give you your story, and your story is quite difficult to do that internally. Yeah.
There's a knowledge bias internally, right?
Yes.
It's almost like you're preaching to the choir. And so everyone says, yeah, sounds great, but you already know so much. And your audience often isn't that same level of knowledge about your business or how you serve or what you offer them. And so it's really important to convey that in layman's terms.
Yeah.
To arrive at a point where you're like, oh, okay, that's the light bulb moment.
Exactly. And to see, to figure out, ask questions about the founders. And then obviously we do lots of workshops and interviews at the beginning. And we just try and pick apart what it is that really is different about that company to any other company. Just like with a person, we've all got a different story. We've all got a different way of telling it. And so it's just essentially that. So we always try and do the strategy. And even if some of that work has been done by the company already, which is great, we put this together and then try and do our own creative strategy. And that is the launch pad for then the visuals. So get the brand done in words. How does it feel like in words? Because words is so emotive. And I think there's a tendency to jump into visuals first. Oh, great, just a logo for this. It's like the worst thing to start with. So process, again, the framework is that then we start to write everything out in words. One word can just bring so many different visuals into your mind. It can communicate so much more. So once we craft everything in words, we do this all on the page, a little positioning statement, some personality traits, and a manifesto, like a few lines where we almost tell a script and of the brand. And then we go into territories, such as when we release broad brushstrokes with some imagery now, some moods, some colours, maybe some notional logos. And then we go through that process with the client, and then everyone's like, I like this, I like this, I like this, and then we co-create with them, and then we refine into more roots, and then we go into, deliverables.
I feel like, based on what you've shared, your experience lends itself really well to the work that you're doing now. Like, you were a journalist formerly and a designer, and now have a marketing agency. You also developed some resilience when you kicked off your agency back in 2020.
Yes.
Do you want to, now that we're 6 years in the future talking about this, I'd love you to just take us back, what it was like starting off an agency, because I feel like for a lot of organizations, a lot of companies that are either trying to rebrand or rebuild or shapeshift now, we're at a time where things are changing so fast. And COVID was a time when things were so low. It slowed right down. But I wonder if you could just take us back there when you first started out.
No, exactly. They say there's never a good time to have like a baby. I've got two, but never a good time. But never a good time to start an agency. And perhaps it wasn't the best time, to be honest. May 12th, 2020, so one of the harshest lockdowns at the time. And we had two kids at home, and we were in Portugal. So my parents obviously were in England at the time as well. So no help. And we were just stuck in our converted garage trying to do it with kids running around, and they were quite young as well, like 3 and in 5. It was difficult, but in a way, you know, you just got to do it. And one thing that has been interesting about AI recently, I think, is just the speed. And it has made me, I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, that's like no speed, where people are just like, can I have a brand in like, a month? And we're like, oh my God, no, stop.
Yeah.
But it has taught me that actually you can just get things done a bit more quickly. And I think starting an agency, just, start it yesterday. Oh, it's always just like, just do it. The worst, the most difficult thing is the procrastinating around it, and just have to just get on with it, I realized. So that was just the time. In a way, it meant that suddenly we had access to a global reach of designers, which was great. So, location was not an option. It didn't even matter. We just set up the agency. We're like, great, well, so-and-so's from over there and so-and-so's from there and you're over there. And as long as we're in roughly the same time zone, let's make it happen.
Right.
Whereas obviously now, then we're like, oh, and then we've got the business rates and we've got the studio lights and we've got the rent to pay and we've got all these other things. We have had to do that because we do still want the space. At the time, it was quite liberating as well, because it meant we could just rock up and not have to worry about those things. And then those came later.
I like that positive spin on it too, what it created, what it made possible for you.
Yeah.
And there was something you had mentioned in there now that I feel like relates to one of the exciting projects you're working on, where you had access to globally designers. And I know there's a project coming up that you've shared about with Canva. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm speaking at Cannes this year as part of something that Canva are doing. Spark to Scale, it's called. So it's quite an interesting concept and theme, actually. So yeah, I'll be doing a talk with them. And I think, activations with larger brands are something that we like doing as an agency as well. And I think probably my journalism background, my husband used to work at BBC as well. He had broadcasting for almost 10 years. So we have approached this agency very differently to, I think, how other branding agent or design agencies are set up. So because we were both business people beforehand, we ran 2 businesses together before we founded this one. I'm always like, what's the story? Is there a new story? Is there a new angle to our brand? This is coming back to what we were talking about with marketing. I'm marketing my agency. So the thing with Canva is going to be great. And obviously being here at Web Summit's amazing. We do, I co-host dinners with Adobe in London, having one next week with them, and LA as well. We might be doing one in New York. So I also do events with Monotype that are a type foundry. And so I do talks with them, and then we do little activations and we're trying to come up with a way of talking about case studies with them alongside the client, and they've done the font and, those sorts of things. So
very strategic partnerships.
Yeah, and it's unconventional, I think, for agencies to do that, whereas we're just trying to look for how we can partner with these bigger tech companies and, and not talk about work, but not talk about selling, just talk about different things and what people are up to. And,
Well, I think it's really neat because then there's overlap with your audience, their audience, shared audience, right? You're creating new groups as a result of this partnership.
Exactly.
It's that back to that, was it Spark to Seed?
Spark to Scale.
Spark to Scale. And it's just like ideation to executing on that vision and making it a reality too.
Yeah.
So when you venture into partnership territory, like that's interesting to hear as an agency that you're doing it, but it seems to be serving you well.
Yes. I mean, it's great. I mean, I love going out for dinner and I love a good glass of wine. And so that's just fun. And I love, Rog and I host a lot of dinners at our house all the time. So every Friday or Saturday, we've always got a big group of people over. Oh, fine. In some capacity. So that comes quite naturally to us anyway. That we, I think it's just thinking about how you can market yourself as an agency outside of just like, a case study or, we did work for this client. It's just, again, creating a little bit more memorability for our brand and a bit more fame, I suppose. Fame is an interesting word to use, but we do talk about that a lot with the brands that we try and create. It's like, we just want to make you famous because if you're famous, we're remembered. And if you're remembered, people will probably buy your product more. So what's going to, especially with AI, what's going to actually differentiate you from big question someone else? And actually, it's whether you're remembered and what your story is. And people will remember you more if you have a good story. Or if you've paid attention to your story.
Yes. Yeah. And you're really clear. Like it's at every single touch point that story is clear and people can understand what they're getting from you, how you're serving it, what they can rally behind it too. Because people can buy into that experience and maybe see themselves as part of something, they're more likely to participate.
Exactly.
How much comes at us, we're very selective, right? And it's important for marketing leaders to recognize that, having a really strong brand isn't an option, but you need to keep pouring that energy in.
Absolutely.
As you're doing some of the foundational work with the clients that you have, how are you getting a read on their audience? What is something that has served you well to ensure that whatever messaging you're going to put out there is actually going to be well received and land with their intended audience and their existing audience? Are there any approaches that you found to serve you well?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we do, so when it comes to the verbal identity, which we developed just before we developed the visual identity,
Right.
because the brand starts speaking before it starts looking. We work with lots of companies that have lots of different consumer groups, or speaking to lots of different people. Even within the website, they could be talking to, we did a prop tech one recently where they were speaking to estate agents or realtors,
Right.
and there were people also speaking on the same site to people who are selling their home and people that were buying a home. So we had 3 really different audiences.
Yeah.
So we have very, I was going to say complicated, but simple messaging matrices where we make sure that there's enough brand flex to be able for the brand to still maintain its own point of view and its own tone of voice, but be able to flex and speak to those audiences differently. We have done testing. We worked with a company called Hotjar. We actually had to test each bit of messaging with the team, and we actually got scored out of and it was quite interesting doing a whole brand. Because normally it's quite an intuitive thing, and people are like, I feel like I like that. But with these guys, because that's what they do, these are testing, they were like, no, we want to actually test to make sure. And, so we were like, okay, cool, let's do this. Yeah. So it really does depend. But yeah, increasingly people want to know if something's going to land right. And so, yeah, we make revisions for that for sure. But essentially it's about making sure that there's enough, flexibility in the brand for it to be able to, to speak to these different audiences and have,
It's a balancing act.
It is.
Right? Especially like so many brands they're focused on acquisition, and maybe the retention side of it gets lost a little bit. And it's important to have both, because if you're just acquiring new customers and you're losing your old ones by way of whatever messaging you're putting out there, you're going to find yourself in the same spot, and it's going to be a dangerous loop.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any sort of missteps that you've experienced, whether it's supporting a brand or in your own agency, that you want to talk about, where you're like, this is a great learning for us. Yeah. I would highly recommend not venturing down this path. Here's why.
I mean, look, every day is a school day and every day is learning. But one thing, so coming back to the process I was talking about earlier, one thing that's really helped us, so you always learn from mistakes. And I think one project we worked on was a company called Home Tree, and they're doing really, really well. They're actually quite a boring company. They're trying to but this is part of the challenge and part of what made it a really exciting project. They essentially are trying to get people to get rid of their old boilers in their houses and get heat pumps instead. So we're like, okay, boilers, okay, great. We're working with their team, and actually their CMO is now a good friend of ours, and we've worked with her on a few other projects since she's left, and she's coming to my Adobe dinner next week, funnily enough, in London. But we were going through the strategy, and we had some wild routes, and we were like, okay, let's do, what you're trying to do is hide in plain sight, because you're trying to smuggle in heat pumps, but you're trying to get rid of boilers. Like, this is really cool, this is really edgy, it's got a bit of tension and stick. This is your story. They were like, okay, great. And we were like, great, if we do this strategic route, we're going to really lean into it. And so we did. And it was a few years ago when we were still going away and working on routes for like 2 or 3 weeks, and the client hadn't seen anything. And we were like, great, we have 3 different routes, like loads of team on the project, like everyone beavering away. And we were like, this feels good. But we'd never spoken to them. And came to like a day when we had to do the presentation, where we were all like, this is going to be great. And then it totally bombed. And they were like, what have you done? Like, we don't understand. And we were all like, but this is the strategy that you chose. Yes, this is what you wanted. And we knew, and they were like, we didn't think it would be this extreme. So we, as a result, were like, okay, how are we going to do this? And, they're really great clients actually in the end. And they were like, just, okay, how are we going to make this work? So we just ended up iterating a 4th route. We went back on the strategy, we toned it down, we did another route. In fact, we did another 2 routes, and then we got there in the end. But the original strategy, it was just, then we were like, okay, we don't want this to happen again. It was stressful for them. It was stressful for us. Yeah. So that's why we built in now a phase into our process, which is about territories. So it's like, bring the client in as soon as you can, as early as you can, before things get too buttoned up and pinned down, and bring them in, because they'll get excited about it too. And they won't be suddenly like, we will have this horrible moment where everyone's just ashen-faced in a call, and there's just silence, and everyone's like, this is really just so, really completely transformed our process. And now we do it, and I was asked the exact same question on a call with a client last week on a pitch. And they were like, when, is there ever a time when a client doesn't choose a route and it goes really badly? And I was like, 3 years ago, yes, but now no, because as a result of that learning from that mistake.
The communication is important, obviously.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing applies for large brands, connecting with their audience and also inviting them into the process. People don't like to be talked down to. They like to be involved. They like to be included, part of the experience. So this is a really good learning now. There's a humbleness that's coming over it. I think a lot of how brands are meant to show up.
I think so. And I think also if you're a marketing agency, what it is you're selling the excitement for the future of their brand as well. So whenever we're in chemistry calls, our one remit is just excitement. Like, we are genuinely excited about this. This is so cool. Like, this is going to be such a great project. And the potential that you can, unleash with just telling story a bit better and just, communicating, like I said, visually or verbally in just a better way and telling that story. So that's what you're selling, is the potential for the future, essentially. Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, because I've been asking other marketing leaders this, and I'd love to know if you had to pick one theme to lean into this year between experimentation, speed, and quality, which one would you choose for the rest of this year?
Always quality, always, because you're only as good as your last piece of work. And, speed is a bit of a race to the bottom, really, as far as I'm concerned. The more you get, don't get me wrong, I'm always, as obviously a founder, I'm always like, can we have stuff like tomorrow? And everyone's like, oh my God, Kat, just, oh. So I'm quite impatient. My husband can definitely testify to that. But I think quality, people can see that, and that will never go away. And I think you also have to have certain values as well as an agency. And we've always wanted to be a Michelin star restaurant as opposed to a diner. I'm not saying a diner is any, good or bad. I love diners, but I want to be a Michelin star restaurant. Thank you very much. So I think quality is always perceived, and people who are value buyers, and you can see that quality, will always see the amount of work and appreciate it as well. And so you have to set your own parameters to that, and you have to stick to those rules, because otherwise, if you don't stand for something, then you fall for anything.
We are at a tech conference.
Yes.
And there's a lot of really exciting pitches happening in startups, and I know you serve a multitude of different industries, but has there been any takeaways for you from Web Summit, either previous ones that you've attended or the one that you're attending this year, especially because you sat on a panel, you were judging yesterday, I imagine, some of the pitches? Anything that you're taking away, what you're hearing, what's coming up as themes?
Obviously AI has been talked about for years. It's actually quite a relief now. The dust has settled a bit more. I've been hearing a lot about agentic, the use of agents and how these are gonna, which I'm really fascinated by as well. So now that, like with any boom, at the beginning, I'd say 4 years ago in Web Summit, it was just like AI, but no one really knew what it was. And everyone like, what, just AI? Yeah. And whereas now there's so much differentiation within it, and there needs to be, that now just the conversation's a bit less frenetic, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, this can do this, this can do this.
It's the how behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I found that, and that's interesting, because now I can be really selective about what would be appropriate for our agency, and even for me as personally or whatever. Whereas I think before it was just like no one really knew what was going on, and so it was just quite frenetic, and I didn't really know what any of it was. And I think things have started to distill. That's great.
It does feel like the brands that are really successful internally know themselves well. They're clear on their values. They know how to serve others and help them arrive at those and make it really clear for their audiences. And then pick and choose where AI can come into their workflows and their process. Would you argue with that sentiment?
Yeah. No, I think I would agree. I saw this great cartoon the other day, and it was like, who are we? And then there's little things and CEOs, and it was like, what do we want? AI.
Yeah.
When do we want it? Now. Like, what do you want to use it for? We don't know. And it's like, I think at the moment there's still always a need, particularly with companies that haven't got AI built into the system, into like the model from the beginning, but companies coming to us and being like, okay, well, we just need like AI to AI ourselves. And so I think that's an interesting conversation to have. But then we're also working with people who have just started a company a couple of months ago or 6 months ago, and it's purely based on the product is purely an AI, and they're performing an AI function. So those ones, it's already integrated into the model. But the larger organizations, we do place branding. We've worked, we've worked for a zoo. We do a conservation park of Aruba, for example. We're still working with them. And so obviously those conversations aren't honestly happening as much, but they're aware that they need to. But
it's experience centric. those ones.
Yes,
Yeah, so they're leading with the thing that's now becoming like, you need to make sure you have an experience when people interact with your brand.
Yeah. So everyone is different essentially.
Yeah.
But everyone needs it. But everyone wants to use it, but isn't quite sure yet if they haven't used it. Yeah.
A conversation that will probably continue to happen. And as you
Yeah.
have more interactions with different brands, you'll be well poised to be like, well, this was a great case study of how you can use it here and it served them well. And this is how you might want to try it out. And
Yeah.
you're like a trusted resource, right?
Exactly. And some brands want it more than others. We did just a German green energy brand called Meteoric, which we renamed. We're launching that in a couple of weeks. And all they really wanted was a tone of voice bot. So we built them a bot. I think we based it around Tron, and it had this. And they were quite wacky. When we got the job, we were like, oh, a German green energy brand. These guys, and we were like, oh, this might not be the most exciting project. In the end, it was the most hilarious project, and they were so much fun.
Yeah,
and all they needed from us for us to deliver with regards to AI was this bot that they now have, and it just writes for them in their voice. But some people require more or want more. They want prompts for illustration or lots of other things besides. So,
do you ever have brands where historically they have had a lot of their marketing, their branding done in-house, and then they've switched gears and they said, we're not quite getting it, it's not working, or we want this new, fresh, aesthetic? Does that ever happen, or are you often working with sort of a different state?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with a really big company in the UK called Pets Home. It's equivalent to Petco, I think, here. And yes, we've worked with them now for over a year and a half, and we've done sub brands for them, and we're doing all sorts of different things, and that happens often when and also I think YouTube rebranded a couple of took 2 years to rebrand, and similar where they need an external agency to come in and to amplify the brand that's already there. And I think that's when we can really, really help, particularly enterprise companies, help their internal teams just say, okay, this is when you should break a rule and this is when you should keep a rule. But it requires, I suppose, experience in branding and doing it every single day to know when you should break the rules and when you can just then say, yes, this will not break the brand, but it will make it come to life, because it's very easy again to, especially if you're doing internal rebrands. And spoke to actually someone the other day as part of Canva, but the Flourish, I think, and she said, oh, we're working through an internal rebrand and we're just finishing it, but it's been a bit tricky and we're not quite just because everyone's got an opinion, everyone's too close to it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You do need that perspective, and that's when we can offer a lot of help as well, and just coming at it with a fresh perspective, really. And we have motion designers in house, 3D artists, typographers, and so we can say, oh, have you seen, what if we did this, and so that's where we can add lots of value.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Kat. This was
welcome.
Lovely and enlightening, and I appreciate you highlighting a lot of what makes brands work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.